I'm Michael Smerconish in Philadelphia. We welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. Merry Christmas, everybody. We know what the president wants for Christmas: credit from all the media for all of his achievements. He tweeted, "Sadly, the fake mainstream media will never talk about our accomplishments in their end-of-year reviews. We're compiling a long and beautiful list." Well, Mr. President, stick around. I'm about to talk about your impact. Plus, with 750 million packages delivered by UPS this holiday season, a growing number are being stolen by so-called porch pirates. I'm about to talk to a man who has figured out how to fight back with a bang. Plus, did you ever talk about something on your phone and suddenly start seeing ads for it? Is it a coincidence? Or are our smartphones spying on us? And a look back at some memorable moments on both sides from 2017, including everybody's favorite blooper by yours truly. George Papadopoulos. I know, I'm a dope. But first, we're almost 1 year into the Trump administration, and the end of any year is a time for assessing, especially this one. Mike Allen had an interesting observation this week in his Axios newsletter. He pointed out how little President Trump and perceptions of him have changed in the last year. Think about it. Roughly the same number of people support him today as did at the beginning of his administration. The Russian probe has remained constant. The elected Republicans remain skeptical of his leadership, but largely compliant. The elected Democrats, they still don't like him. The war with the media has never subsided, and neither have his Twitter fingers. All true. But there's a temptation in those observations to conclude that his administration, the passage of the tax bill notwithstanding, is static, gridlocked, that nothing's getting done in a polarized climate. That would be a mistake. In fact, if the pace of change continues for the duration of Trump's presidency, however long that might be, I think he could become the most consequential president in the modern era. Consequential meaning most important and significant, having the biggest overall impact. As with the criteria that Time magazine uses when determining its person of the year, this is not necessarily a good thing. Think about it. A Supreme Court position that was by rights a Democratic pick instead went to Trump. And his influence on shaping the federal judiciary is far greater than just Neil Gorsuch on the nation's highest court. He broke a Senate record this year by confirming a dozen new U.S. Circuit Court judges, the most during a president's first year in office in more than a century. At the rate that he's going, by next year, more than 12% of federal cases heard will be by Trump-appointed judges. Those picks will be his longest-lasting legacy. The tax bill that he's just signed is the first major overhaul of policy since the Reagan era. Whatever the effect, that won't be undone anytime soon. And by ending the individual mandate, President Trump has felled a major domino that will upset the economic viability of the Affordable Care Act. After all, how can you provide coverage for those with pre-existing conditions if you don't have everybody in the insurance pool? Trump has made cutting federal regulations a priority. He's revoked 67. He's delayed or derailed more than 1,500 others. He's pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, okayed the Keystone Pipeline, recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and refused to recertify the Iranian nuclear deal. On his watch, the Iraq prime minister just declared victory over ISIS. The New York Times' Ross Douthat called it a war Trump won. In immigration enforcement, ICE has arrested more than 100,000 people who entered the U.S. illegally, 70% of whom were already convicted criminals. His State Department has undergone massive restructuring and shrinking, again, for better or for worse. And don't forget about the influence that ideologically driven members of his cabinet are having out of the spotlight. Betsy DeVos at Education, Scott Pruitt at the EPA, Ben Carson at HUD, Rick Perry at Energy, Jeff Sessions at Justice. No, Time magazine got it wrong when not naming the president its person of the year in 2017. By their own definition, the person who most affected the news and our lives for good or ill and embodied what was important about the year was absolutely Donald J. Trump. Joining me now to discuss Douglas Brinkley, he's a presidential historian and history professor at Rice University, and Larry Sabato, the director of the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia. Larry, he's getting lots done, but without popular support. Can that continue?
I doubt it. Look how difficult it was to get that tax bill passed, and he never could get Obamacare repealed. I know about the individual mandate being abolished, but that's not the same thing as abolishing Obamacare. And this was with a new presidency, usually coming with some kind of honeymoon, Republican majorities in both houses. I grant you, thin majority in the Senate, but still, most new presidents with a majority in both houses get a great deal done. I would say that while certainly Trump has accomplished some things, and I agree with you on the judiciary, he could have accomplished a great deal more if he were a different kind of president. I don't know about being the most consequential, but I'll tell you this, he's the most different president in the modern era.
I think everybody could agree on that, including the president. Douglas Brinkley, there's a lot to be said for that which takes place through inaction. Differentiate between action and inaction and what it means for this presidency.
Well, just take a look at what you said, pulling out of the Paris Accord. Yes, he did that. What does that mean in the end? And it means that Donald Trump's turned his back completely on climate change. What history may show is the overridingly important issue of our time. I mean, we've having unusual wildfires, hurricanes, glaciers melting. The planet is really alarmed right now, and Donald Trump decides, it doesn't exist. I don't want to believe and listen to the scientists. So by that very inaction this year, we're losing momentum. We're not educating the society on what to do to make some changes with climate change. I just picked that one. You could go all over and see, you know, he's gutting the Environmental Protection Agency by 33%. Okay, you could save some money right now. And you're also make a little money, mining and leasing the public lands. What does that mean long term? What does it mean 100 years from now? When we start just willy-nilly, desecrating public lands for gouging quick gain profits. Conservation is always about our children's children. So there's a lot that went on this year that I don't think is going to shine well in history. It'll be remembered for Charlottesville, Pocahontas, NFL issues that divide the nation on race and identity.
You know what occurs to me, Larry Sabato, is that everything that Douglas Brinkley, the historian, says might be true, and yet it will be seen differently in different ends of the country. For example, the laundry list that he just rattled off of the negatives will be embraced by the 46% who put him in office.
Well, you're probably right about that, at least most of the 46%. Remember, he has dropped somewhat. He's in the mid-30s. Maybe you could exaggerate it up to 40 based on the fact that the polls often underestimate his support. But he has lost support. Why is that? Because, as Doug was suggesting, he is terribly divisive. Instead of trying to bring people together, and this is not an era when you can bring people together, but he could have won a few percent more. He could have won over some people who were kind of in the middle about him to begin with. Instead, because of what he has done and because of the way he does it, Michael, he has divided people, I think, more than at any time since perhaps the last year of Richard Nixon's presidency. That is not a good thing. It is not a good thing that we are now truly the divided states of America. Red states over here, blue states over there, and oddly enough, those purple competitive states, they're also choosing up sides.
Gentlemen, is it possible to put this in some historical perspective? I want to show you what the president said yesterday, and then, Douglas, I'll ask you to respond first. Roll the tape.
Legislative approvals, for which I'm given no credit in the mainstream media. Harry Truman had more legislative approvals than any other president. We beat him on legislative approvals, for which I get no credit.
Historian Douglas Brinkley, he references Harry Truman. Who comes to your mind, if anyone?
Well, look, just Harry Truman created the CIA, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the National Security Council, the Pentagon, the Department of Air Force, the Secretary of Defense ship. I could go on and on. What did Donald Trump create this year? What is he going to be remembered for? I mean, John F. Kennedy, in his first year in office, Michael, did some bold things. He said, we're going to put a man to the moon by the end of the decade, and he started getting money put into states like places like Huntsville, Alabama, and Houston, Texas, infrastructure money on technology that worked with the space program. Kennedy created his first year the Peace Corps, Alliance for Progress. What's Trump known for? All over the world, he's seen as a bully. That's the net takeaway at the end of the year, and perhaps a bigot. And so it's very hard to see why history is going to be shining a great flashlight on a president with a 35% approval rating, the lowest since polls have been taken, whose big home run was a tax bill. That doesn't really excite people. It is a success at the end of the year, and he did get Gorsuch in, but it's been a very rocky first year.
Dr. Sabato, I think what he's achieved is that which he said he was going to do, which was largely, for better or worse, to reverse Obama-era policies.
Well, you're correct on that too, Michael. Let's talk about what that means, though. When you base your presidency around your base, your party base, and you are unable or incapable of bringing some people from the other party in the long run, that means the same thing is going to happen to Donald Trump. What karma that's happening to Barack Obama. Obama's presidency is being deconstructed piece by piece. Trump and his appointees are pulling out by the roots Obamacare's policies and regulations and programs. Look, at some point, I don't know when, is it 2020, is it 2024, can't tell you, but at some point you will have a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate, a Democratic House again. And I can almost guarantee you that the Democratic base will insist that the Democratic president and Congress do the very same thing to whatever is left of Trump's legacy.
Can I just say as a final word to both Douglas Brinkley and Larry Sabato, I worry most about a crisis. Knock on wood, we've really not had one in the first year of his watch, and I worry about what happens in a very polarized setting in one of those moments when in another time we would most certainly rally around the flag. Happy holidays to both of you. I really appreciate your expertise. Perfect guests for today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Michael.
What are your thoughts? Tweet me at Smerconish. Go to my Facebook page. I will read some responses throughout the course of the program. What do we got, Catherine? Can you give the Trump bashing a break? Why not point out the positive facts versus negative opinions? Smerconish. Tricia, are you blanking me? Like, that was the most, I wrote every word of it myself. That was the most even presentation of what this year has been that you will find anywhere. That's not an MSNBC view. That's not a Fox view. That is a straight down the middle assessment of, for better or worse, here is what has just transpired. And it gets frustrating for me for people who hear what they want to hear what they think they hear, and just don't listen clearly. One more if we've got time for it. Your pan of Trump was discussed. See what I mean? This shows your true preferences. I mean, Rajiv, can you please get together with the last tweeter and maybe the two of you can work it out? It's remarkable how people hear the same thing and just take away from it different conclusions. Up next, it's peak package delivery season, which means porch pirates are in full thievery mode. But one man hopes to thwart them in an explosive new style. Is it wrong that I laugh every time I
exercise rooms and swimming pools?
The Hispanic Caucus and DACA recipients, activists as well, are reeling after Democrats postponed action on the DACA program for the third time this year. There was no fix in the September short-term spending bill, no fix in the 2-week spending bill that passed on December 8th, no fix on the spending bill on Thursday before the government ran out of funding. Democratic leaders insist they have a strategy to pass a DACA fix in January. However, will they deliver on the promises, though, and when? Here with me to discuss, CNN political commentator Maria Cardona and chairman of the National Bar Association, PAC, and former D.C. Democratic Party chairman A. Scott Bolden. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning,
Victor.
So let's start here, Maria, with what we heard from Minority Leader in the House, Nancy Pelosi, earlier this year in November.
I'll have to see what the spending bill is, but I fully intend that we will not leave here without the DREAM Act passing, with a DACA fix. And I've made that very clear.
We will not leave. Well, they left and it didn't happen. Explain how this is not a promise broken here.
Well, first of all, let's remember that Democrats do not control Congress. They don't control the House. They don't control the Senate. Exactly. They have very limited leverage.
But she knew that when she said it.
Sure, but what she was doing was certainly pushing not just Democrats, but Republicans as well. Let's remember there are many Republicans who have also made the promise to fix DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, for almost 1 million kids who came here through no fault of their own, who now, thanks to President Trump, who, took that protection away from them, are now in limbo. And so what she was voicing, which is still the case today, is that protecting these dreamers, as we call them, is a huge priority for Democrats, is a huge priority for American voters. And the hope was that Republicans would also make sure that this was a priority for them. We know that many of them support this. There is a bipartisan bill in Congress right now that if Republicans had the political will to put it on the floor right now, it would pass overwhelmingly with bipartisan support.
There's also Jeff Flake who said that in voting for the tax cut that he got some confirmation that there would be a DACA fix as well. So there is bipartisanship in the Senate as well. Let me get this guy because I don't have a whole lot of time here. Sure. But this obviously is something that has bipartisan support, as Maria pointed out and we pointed out in the Senate. But if Republicans say yes, there will be a DACA fix, there will be protection for these roughly 800,000 undocumented peoples in this country who came here as children, no fault of their own, but we want money to start building this wall. Is that a fair exchange?
It's not a fair exchange, quite frankly.
But should Democrats take it?
Well, if the Democrats what? I'm sorry.
Should Democrats take that deal?
Of course not. They ought not take that deal because this has bipartisan support if they can get it to the floor. And remember, this isn't over. January 19th is when that spending bill is up and they'll have to do another take. And Schumer has given a commitment to 17 or 18 Hispanic members of the House, as well as some others in the Senate, that they're going to lay the law down, or they're going to lay down the law on this. But this is about political capital. Mm-hmm. And the Democrats are committed to spending political capital on this. There's some Republicans as well. And remember, the backdrop of all of this is 2018, and that's as important for the Republicans as it is for the Democrats on this DACA issue.
All right, Scott, let me stay with you. And Doug Jones, Senator-elect from Alabama, is heading to the Senate in January, and there was an open letter signed by 20 organizations that worked to get out the vote for Doug Jones in that special election just a couple of weeks ago. I want to read a line from it. The ticker tape for Jones' victory has barely been swept from the floor, and we are already seeing him pandering to the right and stepping away from the interest of the people who elected him. Just a couple of days ago, he had to walk back when he told Jake Tapper that it's time to move on from the sexual harassment allegations against the president, and some in the Senate who have said that the president should resign. Are you concerned about the degree to which Doug Jones will fulfill those promises he made to Democrats to win this race, considering how conservative, how ruby red of a state Alabama is and what you're seeing from him already?
I'm not worried yet, and I hope I won't get worried once he gets in. This is hardcore politics, and Doug Jones' win was a great win for the Democrats, certainly better than Roy Moore being there. But here's the deal. He's in a very, very difficult situation because he's coming from a red state. African Americans and others voted to support him. He owes a lot of people, and he owes a lot of people who aren't ruby red, if you will. So he's going to have to balance that act, support those who supported him. It's going to be tough, but we have to keep politicians like Jones accountable, and we have to press them and make them vote the way we want them to vote to support what's in our best interest and usually what's in the best interest of America. We'll see.
Maria, he's up again in 2020, just filling out the re-election from Jeff Sessions back in 2014, so he's going to be back on the ballot again. Your degree of concern, considering what we've seen in just the short couple of weeks since the election?
Well, I would echo what Scott said. He is completely in a very difficult position, and he does have a tightrope act he has to perform here in the next 2 years. But I am going to give him confidence and the benefit of the doubt because he is from Alabama. He is from the communities that supported him. He understands the issues that are important to the voters of Alabama, and he ran a fantastic campaign. And I believe that the relationships that he has actually nurtured for decades on the ground are relationships that he will continue to respect, and that he will mirror the issues that are important to most Alabama voters. And like Scott said, what's important to most Alabama voters, the economy, health care. I do believe these issues of sexual allegations will be front and center as well. And Scott mentioned, or I'm sorry, Doug Jones mentioned that this was going to be something that, you know, moving forward, he agreed that these women need to be heard. So all of these issues, I think, are issues that will help him going into his reelection campaign, which will be tough but doable.
All right, Maria Cardona, Scott Bolden, thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Well, up next, proof that one person truly can help turn a child's life around. See how a high school football coach opened up his heart and his home to one of his players. You don't want to miss this remarkable story. Well, it's been nearly 1 year since President Trump took office, and by any measure, it's been a whirlwind of events on everything from the appointment of Justice Neil Gorsuch to passing tax reform.
CNN's Dana Bash takes a look back at some of his most memorable moments of 2017.
Let's be honest, the first year of the Trump presidency feels more like a decade because of the relentless stream of news. Here's a look at some of the key moments of President Trump's first year in office. For candidate Trump, large campaign crowds were the norm. But at his inauguration, this was a sore subject. The new president grew angry watching reports his inaugural crowd size was smaller than President Obama's. One of his first presidential acts was to order his press secretary to do this.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period.
That's something the president himself amplified while standing in front of a CIA memorial to fallen heroes.
We had a massive field of people. You saw them, packed. I looked out. The field it looked like 1.5 million people.
But the numbers didn't lie, and the episode set an early Trump administration tone. Government regulation. It sure doesn't sound exciting, so it's no surprise the Trump administration effort on this was not splashy 2017 news.
1, 2, 3.
But the president withdrew hundreds of regulations, a dull term with a real-world impact, from the safety of the products you use to the air you breathe.
We have reduced unnecessary regulations to a point that this country hasn't seen in years.
It was a promise kept to Republicans who argue excess regulation hurts business and economic growth.
Raise your right hand.
The most lasting Trump 2017 accomplishment is arguably the nomination and confirmation of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court.
I will do all my powers permit to be a faithful servant of the Constitution and laws of this great nation.
The seat was open for a year since the death of Justice Antonin Scalia and Senate Republicans' refusal to consider President Obama's pick, Judge Merrick Garland.
You will go down as one of the truly great justices in the history of the United States Supreme Court.
Judges can disagree without being disagreeable.
Getting Gorsuch was noteworthy not just for the Trump legacy, but the process.
It is an extraordinary resume.
From announcement to confirmation, this success was the most conventional Trump undertaking of the year. After months of back and forth between Donald Trump and North Korea's dictator, words like Rocket Man and Fire and Fury, the president took his insults to the world stage, his first speech at the United Nations.
If it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
The rhetorical crossfire continued on Twitter and through regime statements.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
By year's end, the escalation reached new heights. North Korea tested its most powerful missile yet, with the capacity to reach the U.S. mainland. No discussion about Donald Trump's first year in the White House would be complete without talking about his favorite little birdie. He sent more than 2,000 tweets in 2017 alone, from the mystery of Covfefe to a series of really consequential posts, like unprecedented attacks on his own party's leadership, and some head-scratching retweets. This anti-Muslim video sent by a Brit convicted of hate crimes caused a diplomatic rift with the British Prime Minister, plus his claim that President Obama wiretapped Trump Tower. Yet the one that may come back to haunt him the most, taunting fired FBI Director James Comey. Better hope there are no tapes of our conversations. The hands-down biggest 2017 Trump defeat, failure to repeal and replace Obamacare. John McCain's dramatic no vote sealed its fate, but Republicans were split on how to fulfill their Obamacare repeal promise, one that helped them win control of government. That loss made President Trump and Hill Republicans' quest for tax reform a political life-or-death mission. Must pass legislation.
The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, as amended, is passed.
And it worked.
People are going to be very, very happy. They're going to get tremendous tax cuts.
Whether most Americans, especially working-class Trump voters, will see that as a win, to be determined. And finally, the most important Trump moment of 2017, firing FBI Director James Comey. Sacking Comey while he was investigating potential 2016 Trump-Russia collusion caused a political earthquake with aftershocks still rattling the president.
We'll see what happens.
Not the least of which, Comey's revelation that he kept detailed memos documenting meetings with the president, which Comey asked a friend to leak to the press.
I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
That's exactly what happened. And Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller's Russia investigation was a cloud over the first year of the Trump presidency, which so far produced indictments of 2 former Trump campaign officials and the guilty plea of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn for lying to the FBI. What a year. What will 2018 bring? Buckle up.
No matter what size your label says, Men's Warehouse has you covered.
All right, so Victor, I know you still have some more shopping to do, so this next story is for you. If you're looking for that unique gift this holiday season, you may want to consider a very special bear.
Yes, he knows the best words. He's got like the world-class memory, and he has an American flag he carries around. Here's Jeannie Mose.
Prepare to be blown away by this Christmas gift just by the fact that it exists.
The wind whispered through the forest, I come when the trumpet sounds. Introducing the original Trumpy Bear.
Is this really a thing? Reads a typical comment.
Just find the secret zipper and pull out the flag blanket. Then
this looks like a bad SNL skit. Read another.
Everyone knows Trumpy Bear loves to go to the golf course.
When I ride with Trumpy Bear, he makes my golf game great again. Thank you, Trumpy Bear.
Is this crap for real? Read a third.
Simply style his trademark hair.
You betcha.
Order now for only 2 payments of $19.95.
I can personally vouch for Trumpy Bear. He exists. We have one. A company that specializes in seen-on-TV ads is doing the marketing for the woman who created Trumpy Bear. Nothing partisan, the VP says. We'd like everyone to buy it, meaning Trump lovers and haters.
Trumpy Bear is proudly made in America. I'm kidding, it's made in China.
The most fearless bear anywhere.
That's right, he will kick Winnie the Pooh's ass.
Instantly recognizable with its red tie and its combable hair. No wonder critics are making small hands jokes. I am disappointed with the size of its paws. One thing Trumpy Bear cannot do is tweet. No fingers. Hey, if President Teddy Roosevelt can inspire teddy bears, why can't President Trump inspire Trumpy Bears?
I'm proud to have Trumpy Bear ride by my side.
Its maker is planning some design changes in the new year, but it will still come with
the special certificate of authenticity.
So that you-know-who can't say,
why doesn't he show his birth certificate?
Jeannie Mose, CNN.
God bless Trumpy Bear.
New York.
So this is the bill right here. We're very proud of it.
He initially wanted to have a press conference. His aides prevailed on him not to have one.
I could have started with infrastructure. I actually wanted to save the easy one for the one down the road.
If he wants Democratic votes, then I want to see his taxes. I want to make sure that whatever we're doing is not designed to basically line his pockets and the pockets of all his friends.
President Trump's longtime secretary, Rona Graham, is the latest member of his inner circle to face questions from lawmakers in the Russia investigation.
The FBI has thwarted a plot that targeted San Francisco around the holidays.
The life of ISIS is going to live beyond the demise of ISIS in Syria and Iraq.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Renee Marsh, in for Christy Paul. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Victor Blackwell. Good morning to you. President Trump is spending Christmas break at his island resort, Mar-a-Lago. He's there this morning celebrating his first major legislative win, tax reform.
And the president is cheering what he calls the largest tax cut in history. Quick fact check, it is actually the fifth largest cut since the 60s. Despite his excitement, aides told him that he shouldn't do those end-of-the-year traditional press conferences for fears that questions about Russia could overshadow the tax bill.
And those concerns are coming as investigators, we know, interview the president's longtime personal assistant as part of the investigation into the meeting between Donald Trump Jr. and several Russians.
CNN's Dan Merica joins us live from near the president's Florida resort. Dan, no doubt the tax bill is a big win for the president at the end of the year, but of course his aides didn't want him to step on that.
Yeah, good morning, Renee. It is a huge win, and it was actually surprising to many journalists who've been covering the president that he did a relatively small signing ceremony in the Oval Office and then didn't do that traditional press conference. This is a man who built himself as a larger-than-life promoter, ran a campaign based on that, and then it was surprising that this huge legislative victory that he had, that he didn't do a bigger event. He noted that in that Oval Office ceremony, saying that he wanted to do something bigger in January. But as you noted, his aides suggested to him, maybe let's not do a press conference. They want this tax bill to be the focus. They think it's a huge win, and they want him to be talking about that, not about questions about Russia and a whole host of other issues. Now, he is here in Mar-a-Lago for the winter holiday, where he's surrounded by a lot of longtime friends. He's really at his most comfortable here. But as the calendar turns to 2018, the focus will now be on whether Republicans can hold the House and Senate. President Trump was asked yesterday if he's going to go out and sell this tax bill. Take a listen to what he said.
I don't think I'm going to have to travel too much to sell it. I think it's selling itself. It's becoming very popular. But I think you'll see something on February 1st when they open up the paycheck.
Yeah, that's kind of wishful thinking for the president. He doesn't think he'll have to travel to sell this bill, that it will sell itself. It's an unpopular bill, however. 45% of Americans disapproved of it in November. More now, 55%, according to a CNN poll, disapprove of that bill. So the president will have to step out and sell this bill, as well as other Republicans. It's critical for the president's future agenda, which they say may be welfare reform, could be infrastructure. It's critical that they hold those majorities, those slim majorities, especially in the Senate, so that those things have a chance of getting done. If that's going to happen, many Republicans acknowledge the president is going to have to step out and sell this bill and hopefully turn it from an unpopular bill to something that the American people support, Renee.
That's right, Dan America reporting live for us from Florida. Thank you, Dan.
All right, CNN political analyst joining me now, Mark Atalov, a senior White House correspondent for Bloomberg News, and Matt Visor, the deputy Washington bureau chief for the Boston Globe. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, Margaret, let me start here with you. Minority Leader in the House, Nancy Pelosi, sent a letter earlier this week to Speaker Paul Ryan expressing the concerns of some Democrats, especially those on the House Intelligence Committee, that Republicans will be wrapping up the investigation into potential Russian collusion soon. And we now have the response from Paul Ryan's spokeswoman saying, in part, Leader Pelosi would like to see this investigation go on forever, whether it concludes next month, next year, or in 3 years. She will say it is too soon. So how justified are these concerns? Are there clear indications that this investigation, at least in the House, will be wrapping up in short order?
Well, the timeline to watch, of course, really is Bob Mueller's investigation when that wraps up. And there are no indications that that is on the cusp of wrapping up, even though that is what the White House had hoped for. But it does appear that The House committees are looking, in terms of the Republican leadership, to wrap this up, going up to New York to do that interview with the president's longtime assistant. For the Democrats, of course, they see this to some extent as an issue to continue criticism of the president. I would say it's interesting to watch Paul Ryan's language just a few months ago. Remember back in the summer talking about how Mueller was absolutely not a partisan, how he'd been appointed by Republicans, was a Republican, trying to end this idea of politicizing Mueller's involvement. You're seeing a different tone now across the spectrum from Republicans, while saying that they support Mueller raising questions about those investigations. Republicans do not want this dragging into 2018, but it will as long as Mueller's investigation is continuing.
Yeah, and we heard from people who are close to those who are part of Mueller's team that they should plan to be part of this investigation, continue their work through much of 2018. And Matt, Margaret brings up a good point that many people, of course, are watching the Mueller investigation because of the investigations. He's the only one who could bring criminal charges. There may be some political prescriptions based on what the House or Senate investigations find. But based on the partisanship that we've seen, especially in the House investigation with Chairman Nunes having to recuse himself, although still issuing subpoenas, I mean, what fruit can come from this investigation in the House? Is it now pretty much no?
It's hard to say. I mean, the anticipation is for there to be sort of two different reports, one from the Republicans and one from the Democrats, which it just sort of tells you where this investigation is headed with the partisanship and the disagreements between both parties over what prism through which they look at this investigation. There are some things that they could do, and Ashley Strong, the spokeswoman for Paul Ryan, alludes to some of this, which is preparing for the midterm elections and making sure that whatever happened in the lead up to the 2016 election doesn't happen in the lead up to the 2018 election. So I think that Congress could attempt to do something in that vein, but even that is a little bit difficult to tell, given that the president is still, sort of not really on board that there's a problem to deal with in the first place.
Matt, let me stay with you. And a source who has knowledge of the session has confirmed that Rona Graff, the president's longtime secretary and personal assistant, rather, was questioned by the criminal investigation, Mueller's team, as part of their look into potential Russian collusion. Detail for us how central she is to this investigation.
She is, one of the longest-serving people who've been around Trump, outside of his family. She's been within the Trump...
Let me correct that. Investigates with the House Intelligence Committee, but go ahead.
She's been with Trump for 30 years. She is the person through which phone calls you would call Rona and she would patch you into Donald Trump. But, she's the conduit to him throughout many of his ups and downs in his business career. So she's very close to Trump, but she knows Trump very well. She's been loyal to Trump. And so I do think that she is one of those people who, could potentially shed some light on Trump's past interactions with Russians. She was not part of the campaign apparatus as much. There's other aides who were around him at that time. But she is a person who knows Trump and who knows his world quite well. She wasn't necessarily inside some of those meetings, but she would have been setting them up.
Margaret, to you, we learned from CNN's Jeff Zeleny that the president did want to hold that traditional end-of-the-year news conference before heading off to Mar-a-Lago, but his advisors told him that he shouldn't because they expected he would besieged by their term by questions about the Russia investigation, and likely he would have. By that logic, considering that the investigation could stretch deep into 2018, are we not going to see a news conference from the president for most of next year? Will he not do a non-Fox News interview? I mean, there has to be a better strategy than avoid questions.
Well, certainly we'll be looking for this. We had been encouraging the White House to do that end-of-year news conference, although I have to say I wasn't terribly surprised at the reluctance to do so. It, of course, would have turned into several questions about issues that had nothing to do with the tax bill, and the tax bill is what the president wanted, or his team wanted, to end the note on message-wise. But look, I think it is instructive that since those first round of interviews in the first 100 days, you've seen far fewer interviews with the president. You haven't seen the sort of traditional news conferences that allow a real give and take, a real substantive discussion of the issues. The president has really preferred these last-minute shouted questions in the Oval Office, or even most favorite outside as he's getting ready to board the helicopter, the drama, the sense of urgency, the choppers, the background noise, and it allows him to control the conversation a little bit more. His aides concerned that if he did a full news conference, 8 or 9 questions, that he might decide to answer some of those questions, and that it would take on a life of its own. So, but I hope in the new year that he continues the tradition of news conferences. It's important for transparency. It's important so that Americans know what he's thinking on some of these issues beyond the sound bites that we've been able to get in these rushed conversations. But it's complicated. Yeah, the last television interview that was not on Fox News was back in May with Lester Holt, when he revealed what he was thinking when he fired James Comey, and the last formal news conference was in February. So it's been quite a long time. Margaret Taloff and Matt Visor, thank you both.
Thank you.
Well, a former Marine is accused of planning to attack San Francisco during the holidays. We have details on how the alleged plot was.
Welcome back. In Washington, 2018 for the Republicans will be about building political momentum. Now, right now, the president hopes the momentum from the tax bill win will get other priorities through Congress. So President Trump and congressional leaders they'll get together during the first week of the new year to tackle major infrastructure proposals. But with historically low approval ratings, can the president push this agenda forward? The panel back with us now, Errol Lewis and Julian Zelizer. And Errol, let me start with you. The president referred to the infrastructure proposal, which is forthcoming, as the easy one that he'll be able to bring Democrats in on. Is it?
Oh, no. There are a couple of problems. Number one, Victor, is that the president's proposal for infrastructure, at least as it was laid out during the campaign, involves bringing private industry in and having them receive tax cuts in exchange for doing infrastructure projects. Democrats immediately reacted to that. It's the furthest thing from what they would like to see. What they would like to see is flat-out government spending and have it work its way down through the traditional sort of road projects, transportation bills, rebuilding of ports, and so forth and so on. So they're sort of miles apart, maybe not in the overall dollars that might be committed or even the list of projects that should be tackled, but the methodology for it is fundamentally different. And so it's a mistake to think that Democrats will simply come on board.
Julian, from an historian's perspective, big infrastructure spending, building things, historically is popular with both parties to show that this is how we're moving our society forward, but this could get mired in politics like essentially everything else.
No, it should be an easier piece of legislation. The president is not incorrect in that members of Congress in both parties are very desirous to have money come into their districts for these kinds of programs. But there is a fundamental difference on what infrastructure policy means. One, for the president, it's about using private contractors. For Democrats, it's not. And second, look, the tax bill was also low-hanging fruit, and he should have received some Democratic votes on that, and he didn't. So not only are there differences in terms of policy, but the parties are at loggerheads, and it's going to be hard to get Democrats to say yes to anything that President Trump wants at this point.
Let's go back to February, and I want you two and our viewers to listen to what the president said. This was during his joint address to the joint session of Congress about infrastructure.
To launch our national rebuilding, I will be asking Congress to approve legislation that produces a $1 trillion investment in infrastructure of the United States, financed through both public and private capital, creating millions of new jobs.
So that was almost 300 days ago, Errol. Will this plan coming from the White House, will it be really coming from the White House, or will this be something like what we saw for the health care fight, where he's going to sign on to something that really is birthed through through Congress?
Well, he's gonna need a lot of cooperation, and it's going to be very tricky. I mean, one thing that stands out, Victor, is that when he made that promise, or when he made that suggestion, that was $1.5 trillion ago.
Yeah.
I mean, now because of the tax cut, the money's essentially gone or spent, if you want to think of it that way. So over the next 10 years, if you're going to add $1.5 trillion to the deficit, you are not going to also be able to add another $1 trillion for infrastructure, even if you think it's a good idea. Congress will have to try and figure that out. One thing that probably won't be available, I think it's safe to say, is that they won't be able to do it with 51 votes. They won't be able to slide that through as a budget bill because, once again, they really kind of maxed out the nation's credit card.
And Errol, let me stay with you on this. You said that if they're $1.5 trillion ago and now you want to spend another $1 trillion, the money's gone. That is, unless you start cutting spending. Listen to the question of entitlements and where that discussion will go in 2018. First from House Speaker Paul Ryan and then from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
Hey,
Why doesn't he show his birth certificate?
Jeannie Mo, CNN.
God bless Trumpy Bear.
New York.